All right, leaving Frank Crowley and headed out into the cold, the bitter cold. Of course, we got a nice breezeway here that keeps the wind down. Thankfully, if I tried to go upstairs today, it would not be pleasant. So I came up here today to handle a bond situation for a client who's in jail in Lew-Sterrett on not an aggravated sexual assault, just a sexual assault case. So, you know, a sexual assault case can be aggravated by a weapon or a serious injury, but if those things aren't present, then it's just a sex assault case. And so I'm bonding somebody out on a bond. It's a $25,000 bond. We're getting her out, and then we'll be attacking the case, trying to get it dismissed. So I had to stop recording as I passed people on the stair. Try not to be obnoxious about this, but well, I can't wait to get in my car and take off this mask. One thing that I really want to talk about today in this video is the perception of what criminal defense attorneys do. And I think possibly from news programs and TV shows, there's a great misconception about what we do, and I'd like to address that. I'm going to pause this while I get in my car. All right, so misconceptions need to be addressed, because if you have a wrong idea about something, it's important to know and to kind of acquire better information so you can reassess your perspective and your frame of reference. So I think if people feel that criminal defense attorneys are all about trying to find tricks and loopholes to get people off on their cases when they are otherwise guilty of doing the crime, so to speak, they've done what they're accused of doing, and our job is just to find a trick and a loophole to get them out of that liability, that's actually a misconception. The reason I say that is because in what I do, my job is to persuade decision makers at every phase of a criminal case. So the way I tell it to people when I'm talking to people on the phone about new cases that they might have, clients, relatives of potential clients, I tell them, look, at every stage of a case, a criminal case, there's somebody making a decision about the person who is accused or under threat of accusation, under investigation, under arrest, in jail, waiting for a court date, whatever the case may be. Someone who has the potential or is already charged with a crime. There's a decision maker, and that decision maker starts with the victim of the crime or somebody who overhears or witnesses the crime, whoever might decide to call the police. That person is the first decision maker on the case. And there are times when that decision maker can be persuaded not to call the police. It's not all the time. In fact, it's very rare that an attorney gets involved in a case early enough to have the potential to persuade someone not to file a case. But I'll tell you, if I was able to talk to people in family violence situations in the heat of the moment when someone's deciding to pick up the phone, I would strongly try to persuade them not to pick up the phone, to resolve the thing on their own, because what I think people in those situations don't realize is someone almost always gets arrested when the police come out to a family violence call. And it's not always the person who they think should be arrested or they would want to be arrested. And it's far better, because in those cases, more than almost any other case, generally when the people finally get back out of jail and then are faced with the prospect of defending themselves on the criminal case, the victim, so to speak, decides that they really didn't want to prosecute in the first place. Sometimes they didn't even want the person to be arrested, but other times they decide, it's enough. We want to mend this dispute and get back together and live happily ever after, and then they have to decide or try to figure out how they're going to get that case resolved, get it dismissed. So that's the first decision maker, is whoever calls the police. So if I can get in and persuade at that point, that's what I try to do. It's better for everyone if a case ends early than late. It's cheaper, so less risk, less stress. Hey, how you doing? I only put my mask halfway on. It's really tight around here, but just for his sake. He sees people all day long, and he shouldn't have to put up with having to breathe my air, however minimal it might be, that reaches him. So, I'll put my mask back on. So, that's the first decision maker. Like I said, it's very rare that I'm in a position to try to persuade that first decision maker. But sometimes, less rare, I can persuade the responding police officer or an investigating detective. And that can go very well. I don't want to make it seem like I can work magic and that I can always persuade a responding officer or a detective to not file charges, not make an arrest, because that's not true. But sometimes that can be done. And when it can be done, if it can be done, it's very important to get it done, because it saves, again, a lot of time, energy, stress, emotion, money, liability, the risk of a criminal record. It's just the best way to get a case over with. Is the earlier the better. So once that officer or that detective files a case, a warrant is issued, or an arrest is made, and that case then proceeds over to the courthouse, whichever courthouse it goes to. Usually it's going to be a county courthouse like Frank Crowley. Then the prosecutor's office becomes the decision makers, and they decide whether an intake to file that case, put it into a court or not. But the only proviso is that felonies must have an intermediate step, kind of a check and balance on the power of police agencies to file serious charges against somebody, and that is the case must go through a grand jury who decides if they think there's probable cause to believe that an offense has occurred, and if they do believe so, that they true bill the case and send it on to court. If they don't believe there's probable cause that a case should be filed, or the case shouldn't be filed for some other reason, and there can be many, then that grand jury would no bill the case and not send it to court. So they're the decision makers at that point. And so if I can get in and persuade them in a way that's effective, that communicates to them in a way that they understand, these are citizens, so they're not lawyers, then again, it's early on in the case. The best way to cut it off is cut it off early. If that can be done, it's terrific. Once it goes beyond the grand jury or on a misdemeanor goes straight to court, then you have a court prosecutor. Whoever's the prosecutor assigned to that court. Dallas County, for instance, there's usually 3 prosecutors in each court. Although up in felony court, you have a lot of specialized divisions, a lot of specialized prosecutors. So if you get an organized crime case, or a sex assault, or an assault or an injury to a child or elderly, there's a lot of things that there's specialized divisions that deal with these. First degree felony drug case, that goes to drug court. So it'll go to a felony court in name and number, but then there's a specialized prosecutor that has to deal with that case that we have to coordinate things with. They're the decision makers at that point. Now, if you can't get things done with the prosecutor to your satisfaction or to the client's satisfaction, then the next person or group of people would be either judges or jurors. And they decide the case. And then after that, you have the possibility of appeals all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States is a possibility. Now, don't think that every case can be appealed, and don't think that once a case is appealed, every case can go up to the Supreme Court. It's not like that. I don't want to send you through law school here, but it's just not like that. Most cases don't get appealed. All right, so having said all that, persuading decision makers, even if I am successful in persuading a decision maker on a case, what you have to understand is it's not because I'm using tricks or loopholes. I can't persuade a prosecutor to do something that they don't want to do and they don't think they should do. When I've persuaded them to do something that's good for my client, such as a dismissal, it's because I've given them a good reason that they agree with. It's that simple. And this is a person who is a prosecutor. This is a person who is, and the same thing goes for a grand jury. If I persuade a grand jury to no bill a case, it's not because I asked nicely or I said something tricky. It's because I communicated effectively, distilled the issues down to something they could understand, and persuaded them that this case should not be prosecuted. So if you think it's all tricks and loopholes, it's not. Even the things that could be construed as tricks and loopholes, such as if I persuade a judge that under the law the search was conducted improperly, or under the law a warrant was invalid on its face because it was missing key information, or the affidavit didn't state sufficient cause to be permitted to search. There's all sorts of things that could be considered loopholes by the general public or by anyone who's looking over the shoulder of what's going on. But the fact of the matter is, these aren't loopholes. These are the laws that are designed to give us a fair judiciary, to give defendants in this country, the criminally accused, to give them fair trials, to give them due process, to give them their rights under the laws and under the Constitution of the United States of America to be free from search and seizure unless that search and seizure is warranted pursuant to certain conditions and just the laws of our country. When the police do things improperly, the punishment for that is to suppress the evidence in many cases. Judges don't just throw out cases because the lawyer is tricky. They throw out cases because the evidence is incompetent, or the search is bad, or the seizure is bad, or the stop was bad. Police are prevailed upon to be careful in their they have a great deal of power and authority, and they have to wield it carefully and according to law. And if there's an attorney on the side of the defendant who points out ways in which these things were not done properly, the remedy is often to toss out the evidence or the case in general, in its entirety. And that's a good thing. That not only protects the individual defendant, but it protects all of us. It protects all of us from unreasonable searches, illegal stops, racial profiling, improper searches, warrantless arrests without cause. Basically, there's so many ways in which people's rights can be tread upon, violated, and when those things occur, there are remedies, and those remedies, they're not loopholes. They are to protect our system so that we don't have police who just have the ability to run around doing whatever they want to whomever they want for whatever reason they want, and everybody just is left as human wreckage. If you get in the bad graces of some police officer or detective who wants to ride roughshod over you, they just do whatever they want and you suffer the consequences. That's not our country. And so our laws and our judges prevent that. So when a lawyer gets a result that looks tricky, it looks like a loophole, you have to remember that there's nobody that gives that result just because it's tricky, just because there's a loophole. They give that result up because there's a valid point that is made, one or more valid points made about the impropriety of something that occurred. So it's simple. And that's based on persuasion. It's not based on trickery. So I just want to clarify that, because I think there's a potential that even other lawyers, even civil lawyers, bankruptcy, contract lawyers, real estate lawyers, litigators, tort lawyers, anybody who does anything other than criminal defense might still have this misconception that the general public often has. I mean, they don't have the degree of experience and training that we have to know that, some do. Some understand it fully and perfectly. but others may not have any reason to understand it. So I think it's important to clarify that. People who do criminal defense, we actually consider ourselves defenders of the Constitution and protectors of the rights of the general population. Because if you're minding your own business, you're a law-abiding citizen, you're riding down the road, and you've got all your stickers right on your car, and you've got all your turn signals, you're using them, and you're obeying every law, you don't want to be pulled over. It's not legitimate. You don't want to be searched just because an officer has a hunch. You don't want them planting evidence on you. You don't want them fabricating stories. You don't want them, and these may be things that happen less often to normal, everyday, law-abiding citizens in nicer neighborhoods. But these are the kind of things that people in crime-ridden areas, lower-income areas, racially diverse areas have been suffering under for many years, many decades, even centuries. And we have laws designed to keep that from happening. And I think more and more, as we go through time, those laws are being improved, sharpened, sussed out in case law, and taken more seriously. I think there's less of a prevailing attitude among members of the judiciary that the law may be this way, but we're going to do this anyway. I like to believe in the system. I like to believe in the veracity of people, their character, for truthfulness. I like to believe in the lack of corruption, and I like to believe in our laws and the ability for them to form and shape an excellent criminal justice system for us to be able to rely upon, especially in the event that we are accused, especially in the event that we are wrongfully accused, especially in the event that we find ourselves the victim of our rights being trampled, because it does happen, it will happen. Hopefully it happens less and less, and hopefully when it happens, there's a defense attorney like me, like my colleagues, standing between the defendant and an improper result to uphold the rights, to uphold the Constitution, to help the judge see clear, see the way to uphold those things, and see that justice prevails. Prosecutors' jobs are to seek justice as well. That is part of their oath, is to seek justice. They don't take an oath to seek convictions. Some of them operate as if they are only seeking convictions, but they should be persuadable too. And to the extent that I can make a cogent argument with it boil things down to understandable terms, even for sophisticated people with sharp minds and extensive legal backgrounds, sometimes it's helpful to boil things down to simplified terms so that they can understand. Not everybody has infinite capacity to make correct decisions, even with perfect information. So that's what we do. We persuade, and we also protect and defend the Constitution and the rights of the populace, along with the rights of the individual that's sitting next to us in court. So there's a misconception that I think hopefully I've clarified to some degree, and I'm going to end that here. My nose is kind of stuffy right now. Maybe I have some allergies going on. Maybe it's the warmth of the car in relation to the cold air outside, but it's getting harder to talk without needing to blow my nose. So, as always, I'm going to close this video by saying it's only a free country if you're not in jail. So try to stay out of trouble. Try to avoid law enforcement unless they're friends of yours. They have so much power. I told this to somebody one time in a coffee shop, and they asked me what I thought about police and interacting with them, and I said, look, it's best to avoid police. They have so much power and the capacity to make decisions that will affect you, and sometimes those decisions, they get it wrong, and it's just better to avoid that possibility altogether. and there was a police officer sitting in plain clothes across the coffee shop who shook his head and got up and said, "That's just wrong," and he went upstairs, and so he wouldn't have to listen to it. But I stand behind what I say. I mean, this is from long experience in dealing with this stuff. There are some excellent cops out there that make great decisions and do great work. Even some of them can sometimes mess up. And then there are some awful police officers who most of what they do are mistakes. So I wouldn't want to take a chance with any of them unless I have to. Now, there are times when you need to call the police and use their services, and it's a great thing to have a police force that's confident and professional. We love confident, professional police officers. And, they can protect us in many ways and help us all be safer and give us peace of mind. So I'm not anti-police, but I am anti-dealing with police anytime that's not necessary. If you put yourself in the crosshairs of their suspicion, they're suspicious by nature. And then if they get something wrong, it can really ruin your world. So that's my advice on that. Anyway, stay out of trouble if you can, but if you get in trouble, give us a call, and we'll see what we can do to free you up. Take care, everybody.